It was one of those quiet evenings when the streets seemed to hold their breath. The kind of calm that police officers both appreciate and dread, because calm can turn into chaos in a second. Two officers were patrolling a small neighborhood, the kind of area where everyone usually knew everyone else. The night air was cool and the sound of the radio hummed softly in the background. Most calls that night had been about small things, noise complaints, a lost dog, a fender bender. Nothing serious, just another routine shift. They were about to call it a night when one of them noticed something that didn't fit. A silver car was parked awkwardly outside a small convenience store, not in a proper spot, more like it had been stopped in a hurry. Inside the car sat a man, alone, his hands gripping the steering wheel. The headlights were off, but the car's engine was still running. The man's eyes seemed restless, shifting between the store entrance and the side mirrors as if expecting someone, or trying to avoid being seen. "Looks nervous," one officer said quietly. The other nodded, watching the man closely. After a few moments, the man got out of the car, walked into the store, and disappeared behind the glass door. His movements were quick and tense. The officers exchanged a glance. They weren't looking for trouble, but something about his behavior didn't feel right. They parked nearby and waited. A few minutes later, the man came out carrying a small paper bag. He wasn't running, but there was an uneasiness in his steps. When he noticed the patrol car, he froze for just a second. Barely noticeable, but enough for the officers to pick up on it. They stepped out of their car. "Evening, sir," one of them said, keeping his tone polite but firm. "Mind if we talk for a second?" The man hesitated. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, his voice calm but strained. "Routine check," the officer replied. "Mind showing some ID?" The man sighed quietly, then reached into his pocket and handed over his wallet. His hand shook slightly. The ID showed a name, an address in a nearby city, and a photo that matched him. At least mostly. The picture looked a bit older, and the man in front of them seemed more worn, with tired eyes and a beard that hadn't been shaved in days. "Where are you headed tonight?" one officer asked. "Just passing through," the man said. "Got off work late. Needed to grab something to eat." The answer was simple, maybe too simple. One of the officers glanced into the paper bag, just a sandwich and a bottle of water. Nothing unusual there, but something about the way the man avoided eye contact made them uneasy. "Would you mind if we run your ID real quick?" He gave a short nod, not saying a word. The officer walked back to the car to check the name on the database. The other officer stayed with the man, trying to keep the mood calm. "So, you live in the city?" "Yeah. Been working around here for a while," the man said quietly. His voice trembled a little. The radio crackled inside the patrol car. The officer checking the ID frowned. The system showed a small flag. Nothing serious, just an address mismatch. The ID number didn't match the address listed in the state system. It could have been a typo, or it could have meant something else. The officer returned and asked, "You sure this address is current?" The man hesitated again. "Yeah, I moved recently. Haven't updated it yet." The answer was reasonable, but his eyes said something different. They darted toward his car, then back at the officers. "Sir, do you mind if we take a quick look inside your vehicle?" "Why?" he asked, his tone shifting slightly. There was no anger, just a sense of fatigue, as if he'd been through this before. "It's just a routine check," the officer said. "You're not in any trouble if everything checks out." The man sighed deeply. "Fine, go ahead." The officers opened the driver's door and shone a flashlight inside. The seats were worn, the floor had some dirt, and there were a few crumpled receipts and old coffee cups. Nothing illegal. But then one of them noticed something odd, an envelope tucked halfway under the passenger seat. He pulled it out. It was unmarked, old with bent corners. Inside were a few folded documents, some kind of hospital paperwork, and a photograph. The photo showed a woman and a small child, smiling together in a backyard. The picture looked aged, maybe 5 or 6 years old. The man froze when he saw it in the officer's hand. "Where'd you get that?" he asked quietly. "It was under your seat." "These yours?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes softened, and for a second, the calm mask he had been wearing cracked. "Yeah," he said finally.
"They're
"Mine." The officers exchanged glances. Something about the way he said it, softly, almost like it hurt, made them lower their guard just a little. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us to the station. We just need to confirm a few things about your ID." The man didn't resist. He didn't argue. He simply nodded, as if he had expected this moment all along. They placed him in the back of the patrol car following standard procedure. The younger officer glanced at him through the rear-view mirror during the drive. The man sat still, hands resting on his knees, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. There was no anger in his face, just sadness. "You okay back there?" the younger officer asked gently. The man nodded slowly. "Yeah," he whispered. "Just tired." At the station, they brought him inside, had him sit at a small desk, and started filling out paperwork. The usual questions: name, address, where he was coming from, where he worked. He answered quietly, never raising his voice, never making excuses. When asked if he wanted to call someone, he hesitated again. "Can I make one phone call?" "Of course," the officer said, sliding the phone toward him. The man dialed slowly, his fingers shaking. When someone answered, his voice softened even more. "It's me," he said quietly. I just wanted to hear your voice." He paused for a few seconds, listening, then added, "I'm okay. Don't worry." When he hung up, there were tears in his eyes. He wiped them quickly, hoping no one noticed. The younger officer pretended not to. While waiting for the fingerprint results to come back, they went through his personal items, his wallet, a few old receipts, a worn-out keychain. Nothing strange. But the hospital papers from the envelope caught the senior officer's attention. The date on them was several years old. The patient's name matched the man's, but the city and state were different. And under the section for next of kin, it listed a wife and child. The younger officer looked over his shoulder. "You think he's running from something?" "Maybe," the older one said. "But it doesn't feel like a criminal case. There's something else going on here." The man sat quietly, eyes fixed on the table. His mind seemed far away. The fluorescent lights above made his face look pale, and for a moment, he looked more like someone lost than someone guilty. Finally, the fingerprint system beeped, signaling the results were ready. The officers exchanged a look before opening the file. At that moment, the man glanced up at them, his expression unreadable. "Is there a problem?" he asked softly. "We'll know in a second," one officer said, eyes on the screen. The younger officer hesitated, then turned toward him. "Sir, can I ask you something?" The man nodded slowly. "Why did you seem so calm when we stopped you? Most people get defensive or nervous. You didn't." The man gave a faint, tired smile. "Because," he said, "I've spent years running from things I can't escape. When you've done that long enough, you stop being afraid of what's next." The room fell silent for a moment. The sound of the printer echoed as it spat out the fingerprint report. The senior officer reached for it but didn't read it yet. Something about the man's tone had made even the air feel heavier. The younger officer glanced at him again, feeling a strange pull of empathy for someone he barely knew. The man looked down at his hands, fingers clasped tightly together. "Sometimes," he said quietly, almost to himself, "we all get tired of pretending to be someone else." Neither officer replied. They didn't know what to say. The senior officer unfolded the report slowly, scanning the page. His eyes widened slightly, but he didn't speak. The younger one leaned in, trying to read it too. Whatever it said, it wasn't what they had expected. The man noticed their silence. His lips trembled just a little, as if he already knew what they were seeing. And as the clock ticked softly on the wall, the night that had started as an ordinary patrol began to feel anything but routine. The clock on the wall kept ticking, slow and steady, as the officers stared at the report in front of them. The younger one leaned closer, trying to make sense of it. The name on the paper matched the man sitting across from them, but the rest didn't. The system showed a strange note attached to the record, reported missing and presumed dead 7 years ago. The older officer frowned and looked at the man. "You said you moved recently, right?" he asked carefully. The man nodded. "Yes, a few months ago." The officer hesitated before sliding the paper toward him. "Then maybe you can explain this." The man looked down at the report. For a moment, his eyes froze on the words "missing person." His lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. His hands trembled. "I don't understand," the younger officer said softly. "It says you were declared dead." The man took a deep breath, his shoulders tightening. That can't be right," he said, his voice breaking a little. The older officer leaned back, studying him. "You need to tell us what's going on, because right now, none of this adds up." The man ran a hand over his face, exhaling slowly. His eyes glistened under the harsh white light. I don't even know where to start, he said quietly. It feels like another life. The younger officer, sensing his unease, pulled up a chair and sat across from him. Then start anywhere, he said gently. We just want to understand. For a moment, the man didn't speak. The room felt heavy, as if even the air waited for his words. Then, in a shaky voice, he began. 7 years ago, I was in an accident. A really bad one. I was driving home from work late at night. It was raining so hard I could barely see the road. A truck came out of nowhere, swerved, and hit me head-on. They told me later that the car rolled down a hill and caught fire. They never found me. The officers exchanged a quick glance. I woke up days later in a hospital miles away. I didn't remember my name, my family, nothing. The doctors said I had head trauma. They thought I might regain my memory with time, but I never really did. At least not at first. They kept me there for months. When I finally walked out, I didn't even know who to call or where to go. He paused and rubbed his forehead. His voice grew softer. So I started over. Picked a name, took small jobs, moved around. I told myself that maybe my family was better off not knowing. I thought I had died to them anyway. What was I supposed to say? Hey, I'm back from the dead. I couldn't face that. The younger officer listened quietly, feeling a lump form in his throat. The story didn't sound like a lie. It sounded like pain wrapped in truth. Do you remember when you started getting your memory back? He asked. The man nodded slowly. A few years later. Little things came back at first. A street name, a song, then that picture. He looked at the photo on the table, the one of the woman and child. I found it while cleaning out an old bag I had with me that night. It must have survived the crash somehow. That's when I knew I couldn't run from it anymore. The older officer spoke next, his tone calmer now. Why not go home? Why not tell your family you're alive? The man's eyes filled again. Because I didn't know what I'd be walking into. What if they'd moved on? What if they were happier without me? I didn't want to ruin anyone's life again. I just didn't have the courage. The room went silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner. Finally, the older officer sighed and stood up. I'm going to make some calls. If what you're saying is true, we'll need to confirm it. He left the room, leaving the younger officer with the man. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The man stared at his hands, and the officer studied him quietly. There was something deeply human about the way he sat there, not like a criminal at all, but like someone who had been broken by time and guilt. You know, the younger officer said finally, you remind me of my dad. He used to say people don't always run because they're guilty. Sometimes they run because they're scared of what they might lose if they stay. The man gave a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. Your dad sounds like a wise man. He was, the officer said softly. He passed away a few years ago. I'm sorry, the man said. Thanks, the officer replied. Then after a pause, he asked, who was in the picture? Your wife and kid? The man looked down at the photo again. Yeah, my wife and our daughter. She must be about 12 now, maybe 13. I don't even know if she remembers me. His voice cracked at the end and he looked away quickly. Just then, the older officer returned, holding a file in his hand. His expression was different now, less guarded, more thoughtful. I just spoke with the records department, he said. Your story checks out. There was indeed a man by your name declared missing after a crash 7 years ago. The car was found burned beyond recognition. They assumed your body was inside. The man lowered his head, whispering, so they buried me. Looks like it, the officer said gently, but that's not all. Your wife is still listed at the same address. She never remarried. The man's head jerked up. She didn't? No, the officer replied. In fact, she kept your case open for years. She must have believed you were still out there. The man's face went pale. He covered his mouth, overwhelmed. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he whispered, she never gave up on me. The younger officer felt his chest tighten. He couldn't imagine what it must feel like to learn that someone had carried hope for you all that time. After a long pause, the older officer asked, do you want us to call her? The man hesitated, wiping his eyes. His voice shook as he said, I don't know what to say to her. Start with hello, the younger officer said softly. The man let out a small, trembling laugh. After 7 years, I think she deserves more than that. The older officer picked up the phone and dialed the number listed in the old file. It rang several times before a woman's voice answered. She sounded cautious, tired, maybe even afraid to hope. "This is officer from the local department," the older man said carefully. "I need to speak with you regarding your husband's case." There was silence on the other end. Then a soft, shaky voice. "My husband, but that case was closed years ago." "Yes, ma'am," the officer said, "but there's been a development. We believe we've located him." The sound that came from the other end wasn't a word, it was a gasp, followed by a choked sob. "That's not possible," she whispered. He's gone." "I understand how you feel," the officer said kindly. "But we'd like you to come down here if you can." "It's important," the woman didn't hesitate. "I'll be there," she said, her voice trembling. The officer hung up and looked at the man. "She's coming," the man's breath caught. He looked terrified. "I don't know if I can face her," he whispered. "You've faced worse," the younger officer said gently. "You survived everything life threw at you. You can do this too." The man sat quietly for a while, lost in thought. The minutes stretched into an hour. He didn't speak, didn't move, just sat with the photo in his hands. When the knock came on the door, everyone turned. The older officer opened it slowly, and there she was, a woman with tired eyes but a spark of hope still alive in them. She looked around the room until her gaze landed on him. The man stood up, his voice breaking. "It's really you." She covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I'd never see you again." He stepped forward slowly, as if afraid she might disappear. "I wanted to come back," he whispered, "but I didn't know how." For a long moment, no one moved. Then she crossed the room and threw her arms around him. He held her like a man who had just been given back his life. The younger officer looked away, trying not to show emotion. The older one cleared his throat and quietly stepped out, leaving them the moment they had both been waiting years for. Outside the room, the officers stood in silence. The younger one finally said, "That might be the first time a routine arrest brought someone home." The older man nodded. "Sometimes life writes its own miracles," he said quietly. "We just happened to witness them." Inside, the man and the woman stayed in each other's arms for a long time, crying, laughing, and whispering the kind of words that don't need to be written down to be understood. After 7 long years, the missing piece of their lives had finally found its way home. The room was quiet now, but it didn't feel like the same room anymore. What had started as a police investigation had turned into something no one expected. The man and the woman sat across from each other at the small metal table, their hands still trembling from everything that had just happened. The officers stood back, giving them space, though even they couldn't look away. It was the kind of moment that didn't happen often, where reality felt too powerful for words. The man kept staring at her face, taking in every detail as if trying to memorize it again. The small lines near her eyes, the way her hair fell on her shoulder, the way her voice shook when she spoke. It all felt familiar yet new at the same time. "I thought you were gone," she whispered. "I saw the crash site myself. They told me you didn't make it." He swallowed hard, his eyes full of guilt. "I thought I didn't either," he said softly. "When I woke up, I didn't know who I was. Everything felt like a dream I couldn't wake up from." She wiped a tear from her cheek, shaking her head in disbelief. "All those years," she said. "All those nights I prayed you'd walk through that door." He lowered his gaze. "I wanted to," he said, "but I didn't remember where that door was." Her expression softened, though the pain didn't disappear. "You could have found me once you remembered," she said quietly. He nodded slowly. "I know, I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you'd moved on, that you'd hate me for leaving. I didn't think I deserved a second chance." There was silence again, broken only by the faint hum of the lights above them. The younger officer stepped forward gently. "We can give you both some privacy if you'd like," he said. The woman nodded. The officers left the room, closing the door behind them. Inside, the man leaned forward, his voice trembling. "How's our daughter?" he asked. A small smile appeared on her face, one mixed with sadness. "She's grown so much," she said. "She doesn't remember much about you, but she knows your stories." "I made sure of that." His eyes filled again. "Does she know I'm alive?" "Not yet," the woman said. "I didn't know how to tell her something I wasn't sure was real. I didn't want to give her false hope." He nodded, understanding. "I'd like to see her," he said quietly, "but only if she wants to see me." The woman looked at him for a long moment, searching his face. She could see the pain, the regret, the exhaustion, But underneath it all, there was something else, something she hadn't seen in years. The same kindness she had fallen in love with. She would want to, she said finally. She's always asked about you. Maybe it's time she gets her answer. The man smiled faintly, but there was fear behind it. I don't know what I'll say to her, he admitted. Just tell her the truth, the woman said gently. Tell her what happened. She'll understand. He nodded again, staring down at the table. The truth was heavy, but for the first time in years it felt like it might finally set him free. Outside the room, the two officers talked quietly. The younger one leaned against the wall, shaking his head. You ever see anything like this before? He asked. The older officer crossed his arms. Not in 20 years, he said. We go out there thinking we're keeping the streets safe, and we end up reuniting a family instead. The younger one smiled faintly. Maybe that's what real police work looks like, he said. Not just arrests and reports. Sometimes it's just about helping people find their way back. The older officer gave a small nod. You've got a good heart, kid. Don't lose that. This job can make you forget that people are more than the mistakes they make. Inside the room, the man and woman continued to talk. Slowly, she began to tell him about all the years he had missed. How their daughter had started school. How she learned to ride a bike. How she used to sit by the window waiting for a father she didn't remember clearly but still believed in. Each word was like a small cut on his heart. But he listened carefully, afraid to miss even one detail. He laughed softly when she told him about their daughter's stubbornness, how she always wanted to do everything by herself. He smiled when she described her singing around the house, something she used to do as a baby. For a moment, it almost felt like they had never been apart. But then reality crept back in. What happens now? He asked quietly. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. I don't have a home, a job, anything. She looked down, unsure of what to say. We'll figure it out, she said finally. One step at a time. He shook his head. I don't want to be a burden, he said. You've already had to do everything on your own. I don't want to mess that up. You're not a burden, she said firmly. You're part of this family no matter what's happened. You always will be. He looked at her, eyes filled with disbelief and gratitude. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Maybe not, she said softly. But you're still here, and that's enough. The door opened slowly and the younger officer stepped back in. Sorry to interrupt, he said gently. It's getting late. We can help you both get home if you'd like. The man stood, his legs shaking slightly. Home, he repeated almost to himself. I never thought I'd hear that word again. The woman reached out and took his hand. Come on, she said. It's time to go home. They walked out of the station together, the night air cool against their faces. The sky was clear now, stars scattered across the darkness. The man looked up at them as if seeing them for the first time. The younger officer watched from the doorway. Something about the sight made him feel strangely peaceful. The older officer joined him, hands in his pockets. Think they'll be okay? The younger one asked. The older man nodded slowly. They've already survived the hardest part, he said. The rest is just living. As the car drove away, the younger officer couldn't stop thinking about the man's story. He thought about how easily life could change, how one moment could erase everything you knew, and how sometimes the smallest act, like a routine stop, could lead to something that mattered far more. The next morning, the man stood at the front door of a small house, his heart pounding in his chest. The woman had gone ahead to prepare their daughter, to tell her that the impossible had somehow happened. He waited on the porch, clutching the same old photograph in his hand, the edges now creased from years of holding on to it. The door opened slowly. A small girl stood there, her wide eyes studying him curiously. She looked just like the photo, same smile, same spark in her eyes. Mom says you're my dad, she said, her voice innocent and curious. He felt his throat tighten. Yeah, he said softly. I am, she tilted her head. Where have you been? He crouched down, trying to find the right words. I got lost for a long time, he said, but I found my way back. I missed you every single day, even when I couldn't remember why. The girl looked at him for a moment, then suddenly stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. It's okay, she said. You're here now. He froze for a moment, then hugged her tightly, his tears falling onto her hair. The woman stood in the doorway, watching quietly, her own tears glistening in the light. For the first time in years, their home felt whole again. Later that evening, as the house grew quiet, the man sat on the porch alone. The sound of crickets filled the air, and a soft breeze moved through the trees. The younger officer's words echoed in his head. "Start with hello." He smiled faintly. "Hello," he whispered into the night as if speaking to the years he had lost. Behind him, the door opened and his daughter stepped outside, holding 2 mugs of warm tea. "Mom said you might need this," she said, handing him one. He took it, smiling. "Thank you." She sat beside him, swinging her legs off the edge of the porch. "Do you think you'll stay this time?" she asked. He looked at her, his heart swelling. "I will," he said. "I'm done running." The girl smiled, and together they sat quietly under the stars. Inside the house, the woman watched from the window, her heart full. The man had come back from the dead, but more than that, he had come back to life. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by love, forgiveness, and second chances, it was clear that sometimes the most ordinary nights could lead to the most extraordinary stories. The morning light filtered through the curtains, painting soft gold lines across the living room floor. The man sat quietly on the couch, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. He wasn't thinking about the taste. He was thinking about the sound of his daughter's laughter coming from the kitchen. It felt unreal, like a sound he had only ever heard in dreams. The woman was helping the girl get ready for school. He watched them from a distance, afraid that if he blinked, the scene might disappear. It was strange how something so ordinary, packing a lunch, tying a shoelace, could feel like the most beautiful thing in the world when you thought you'd never see it again. "Your shoes are on the wrong feet again," the woman said gently, smiling as she bent down to help the girl fix them. The girl giggled. "I like them this way," she said. The man laughed softly from the couch, and both of them looked up at him. The woman smiled, and for the first time since their reunion, the air between them felt a little lighter. After the girl left for school, the house grew quiet again. The man and the woman sat at the table, the silence stretching between them. It wasn't an awkward silence, just the kind that comes when 2 people are trying to find their way back to something they used to know. "I keep thinking this isn't real," the man said finally. "That I'll wake up somewhere else and find out it was all a dream." The woman looked at him for a long moment. "It's real," she said softly. "But it's going to take time. You've been gone for a long time." "We both changed," he nodded slowly. "I know. I'm not expecting things to go back to how they were. I just want to be here. I want to try." She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "Trying is enough for now," she said. He smiled, grateful for her kindness. "I'll find work," he added. "Something simple. I just want to pull my weight, help around here." "You don't have to rush," she said gently. "You've been through enough. Take a little time to get your footing." But he shook his head. "No, I've spent too much time standing still. I need to move forward now." Over the next few days, the man began to settle into a routine. He helped with small chores around the house, fixing the loose kitchen drawer, painting the porch rail, washing the car. He walked his daughter to school every morning, and though she was shy at first, she slowly began to open up. She'd tell him about her teachers, her friends, and how she hated math but loved art. Every time she held his hand, he felt like he was being given a second chance at life. But at night, when the house grew quiet, the weight of the past still found him. He'd sit outside on the porch, staring into the darkness, haunted by the years he'd lost. Sometimes the woman would join him, bringing him a cup of tea without saying much. They didn't need words. The silence between them had started to heal, little by little. One evening, the younger officer came by the house. He was off duty, dressed in plain clothes, holding a small envelope. The man was surprised to see him. "Didn't expect a visit," the man said with a smile. The officer grinned. "Didn't expect to make a friend during a traffic stop," he said. "But here we are." They sat on the porch steps, talking like old acquaintances. The officer handed him the envelope. "This is your official record update. You're no longer listed as deceased. You exist again." The man laughed softly, shaking his head. "That's good to know. Kind of nice being alive again." The officer smiled. "You know, the department's still talking about you. No one can believe how it all turned out. A lot of the guys said it reminded them why they joined the force in the first place." The man nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes life has a way of reminding us what matters," he said. "You just have to be willing to listen." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset fade into twilight. Before leaving, the officer said, "You've got a good family. Hold on to them." Not everyone gets a second chance. I know, the man said quietly. I won't waste it. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the man began to rebuild his life. He found a job at a small workshop on the edge of town repairing old furniture. His hands, though a little unsteady at first, remembered the skill. There was something peaceful about sanding down wood, restoring things that were broken, maybe because it felt like what he was trying to do with himself. His daughter loved visiting the shop after school. She'd sit on the counter, swinging her legs while watching him work. "Why do you fix old things?" she asked one day. He smiled. "Because everything deserves another chance," he said. She thought about that for a moment, then nodded seriously. "Like you," she said. His chest tightened, but he smiled through it. "Yeah," he whispered. "Like me. Life didn't become perfect overnight. There were hard days, too. Sometimes the memories of his accident came back in flashes. The sound of metal twisting, the fire, the confusion. Other times, guilt crept in when he thought about the years his family spent grieving. But instead of letting those thoughts break him, he started writing them down in a small notebook, a habit the woman encouraged. "Write it all out," she told him. "Maybe it'll help you let it go," so he did. Every night after dinner, he'd sit by the window and write. About the hospital, the faces he couldn't remember, the long nights when he wandered city streets not knowing who he was. Slowly, the pain became words, and the words became healing. One evening, the woman sat beside him as he wrote. "You should share your story someday," she said softly. "It could help people." He shook his head. "I'm not sure anyone would believe it." "Maybe," she said, smiling gently. "But they'd feel it. That's what matters." He looked at her then, and for the first time he saw not just the person he had lost, but the strength that had kept her going. She had carried their world alone for 7 years. Now she was letting him carry part of it again. Weeks later, his daughter brought home a drawing from school. It showed 3 people standing under a bright yellow sun. Above them, in her uneven handwriting, she had written, "My family is together again." He hung the picture above his workbench in the shop. Every time he looked at it, it reminded him that even broken lives could be rebuilt piece by piece. One Saturday afternoon, the older officer stopped by the shop. He was out running errands nearby and decided to check in. He watched the man working for a few minutes before speaking. "You look different," the officer said. The man smiled. "Feels different," he replied. "For the first time in a long time, I know where I belong." The officer nodded. "You gave all of us a story we'll never forget," he said. "Most of what we deal with is pain and loss. But this was hope." "Hope," the man repeated quietly. "That's all I ever wanted back." The officer smiled, shook his hand, and left. As the door closed, the man looked around the workshop. Sunlight falling across the tools, the scent of sawdust in the air, the sound of his daughter laughing in the back room. It was simple, but it was enough. That night, as the family sat down for dinner, the woman looked across the table and said, "You know, it's strange. When I used to dream about you coming home, I thought everything would feel like before, but it doesn't." He looked at her concerned. "Is that a bad thing?" She smiled. "No, it's better. We're different now, but maybe that's what makes this stronger." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Then maybe we can start again," he said softly. "Maybe we already have," she replied. The girl giggled, pretending to make a toast with her glass of milk. "To new beginnings," she said. The man laughed and clinked his glass against hers. "To new beginnings," he echoed. After dinner, as the stars filled the night sky, he stood in the backyard, breathing in the cool air. Life still felt fragile, but it was his again. Real, messy, beautiful. He thought about how everything had started with a routine stop on a quiet night. How 2 officers had simply done their job, never realizing they were about to change someone's entire world. Sometimes, he realized, fate doesn't arrive with loud noises or big moments. Sometimes it shows up quietly, disguised as an ordinary evening, a random encounter, a second chance hiding behind flashing lights. And as he looked through the window at his family laughing inside, he knew that for the first time in years he didn't feel lost anymore. He had been found by chance, by love, by life itself. Days turned into weeks, and the man slowly grew used to the rhythm of his new life. He woke up each morning to the sound of his daughter's chatter and laughter, and even the small annoyances like spilled cereal or forgotten shoes brought him a sense of belonging he had never felt in years. The house was alive again, filled with warmth, noise, and the small moments he had thought he would never experience. He worked at the furniture shop each day, restoring old chairs and tables, smoothing out scratches, sanding down rough edges, and bringing beauty back to worn-out pieces. It was physical work, but it grounded him. Every evening he would return home exhausted but satisfied, knowing that he had built something with his own hands. He even started teaching his daughter small tasks at the shop, how to carefully sand wood or paint a surface evenly. She loved it, even when she made mistakes, and he corrected her gently, laughing at her stubbornness when she insisted on doing things her way. The woman watched them both, a quiet smile on her face. She had been hesitant at first, unsure how he would fit back into the family after so many years. But seeing him laugh with their daughter, listening to their shared jokes, watching him teach and guide, she realized that this man, though changed, was still the person she had loved. He had returned, and more importantly, he had returned with humility, care, and patience. One evening, after putting their daughter to bed, she found him sitting alone on the porch. He was staring at the stars, a quiet sadness mixed with hope in his eyes. She joined him, handing him a cup of tea. "It's peaceful out here," she said softly. He nodded, taking a sip. "It is," he agreed. "It's strange how peaceful life feels when you've been through chaos." She looked at him, concern in her eyes. "Do you still think about the years you lost?" He sighed, resting his elbows on his knees. "Every day," he admitted. "There are nights when I replay everything. The accident, the hospital, wandering those streets not knowing who I was. I think about how I left you both and how much pain that caused." She reached out, touching his hand. "We all carry pain in different ways," she said. "What matters is that you're here now. You're part of this family again, and that's what counts." He looked at her, gratitude and sorrow mixing in his eyes. "I never thought I'd get this chance," he said. "I thought I'd lost everything forever." "You didn't lose everything," she replied. "You just needed to find your way back. And you did." Over the next few months, the man worked on reconnecting not only with his family but also with the community he had left behind. He visited the local library, met neighbors he vaguely remembered, and even helped organize small events at his daughter's school. It wasn't easy. People stared, asked questions, but he handled it with quiet humility. He didn't expect forgiveness or understanding. He just wanted to show through his actions that he had returned to the life he had once abandoned. The younger officer who had been present at his arrest kept in touch as well. Sometimes he would stop by the shop with a small smile and a cup of coffee, asking about the daughter or telling a story about the patrol. He didn't come as an officer anymore, but as a friend, someone who had witnessed a miracle in the form of a routine stop that turned into a life-changing revelation. One afternoon, the man received a letter in the mail. It was from the hospital that had treated him after the accident. The staff had tracked him down, curious about the person who had disappeared for so long and returned. They expressed relief that he was alive and asked if he wanted to reconnect with the doctors who had cared for him. He read it slowly, the words making him feel both nostalgic and grateful. He decided to visit, wanting to thank those who had saved him even when he didn't know who he was. The visit was emotional. The doctors remembered him, some with tears in their eyes, some with astonishment. They were amazed at his recovery, at the life he had rebuilt. They asked questions about his family, his work, his daughter, and he answered quietly, sometimes pausing to collect himself. He realized that life had given him a second chance, not just to live, but to live meaningfully. Back at home, his daughter continued to grow, her curiosity about the world insatiable. She asked endless questions, and he answered as best he could, sometimes laughing at her ideas, sometimes marveling at her imagination. They started building small projects together, a birdhouse, a wooden toy car, and he watched with pride as she learned new skills. She saw him not just as a father who had returned, but as a teacher, a guide, and a friend.